This is Matt Coyne, host of The Cheap Seats. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast here on Public House Media.
This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Completely Serious, where we talk about sports and have fun with great guests. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Completely Serious. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy, and you probably are too. This is Emily, and I'm here today with Lindsay and Elisabeth, and we're here to talk nerdy to you. We got a really awesome topic suggestion idea from some of our listeners about what would it take for you to work on the Death Star. And so we are taking that and running with it. A huge thank you to Juul, Marcellus, and Mandi for the suggestion. We really, really appreciate that. This, again, is just a great reminder that any of you listeners can give us a topic suggestion on our Facebook page, on our Twitter. Those are our most two active social media outlets right now. If you're on Tumblr, that's awesome. Just say something on there and we'll know. But anyways, thanks again to our listeners for this really cool topic. So let's get rolling.
This episode is brought to you by Squadcast. As podcasters who all live in different states and different time zones, one of the most important things when we record, which we always do remotely, is the quality of our audio together. Current solutions like Skype, which we have used, and Zoom are dependent on our internet quality, but Squadcast is a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. We just click a link and we're good to go. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files and then magically uploaded to the guest's computer. We've been using them for a few weeks now, and we love the experience. To get started, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial.
Well, I think first off, we have to discuss and kind of come to a conclusion on exactly who worked on the Death Star. Because before I think we can go any further, I think we have to kind of understand the mentality of who was actually working on the Death Star, whether they were working on the phase of construction or working on it when it was actually a functioning space station.
That is a good point. Because we just see it with all of the stormtroopers in there, but while it was, and we see it to a certain degree when it's mostly finished, but it still had a little bit of construction. Mm-hmm. But we saw it pretty much completely filled to capacity with stormtroopers.
Yeah, and we still didn't really see all parts of the Death Star. This is a massive, massive space station that, that was initially mistaken for a moon. So
right.
Obviously we see we see the brig, we see the prison area, we see, some command areas, we see, various little tunnels and things like that. We see a garbage compactor, but I think compared to the scope of what the whole Death Star is and how big it is, I think there's so much more that is really there that we don't even see, kind of like an iceberg. We only see a small little bit of it.
Yeah, well, and I also want to know, while it was being constructed, what did they call it? Project such and such code? Or
it did actually have a code, and I am beating myself up now because I can't remember it.
Oh, okay.
I remember initially reading about it in the expanded universe, and of course that was years ago, so,
Okay.
All that, information has kind of gotten pushed out of my brain a little bit. But yeah, it was... basically, I don't think especially when it was in the construction phase, I don't think hardly anybody really knew what it was going to be, ultimately. It was a space station. I don't think they even had the concept of this is going to be a super weapon that could destroy a planet. That was something that was very much kept under wraps and kept secret because, until it was operational, it was very vulnerable.
That's a really good point, too. And, I also wonder if, because we saw a lot of military personnel on there, but I'm guessing there might have been other civilians that were employed on the Death Star, and probably even before while it was in construction phase. I wonder if they were just blatantly lied to and said, hey, this is a research station.
Yeah,
Wink,
yeah.
wink.
I mean, it wasn't exactly known for transparency, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like if they were just completely blatantly lied to about what its purpose was, like maybe people would have been more willing to work on it and give their best effort for it, because then they would have been able to do it. Oh, this is bringing up memories from what was happening in Rogue One now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Now I really want to watch Rogue One again, and I feel like I should have done that in preparation for talking about this. Okay. Anywho.
There had to be somebody who was like a mastermind, though, who had the very end part of the hardware of the weaponry.
Right.
I mean, that person either had no soul or was paid really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Or both maybe. But yeah,
Right.
exactly. There had to have been somebody who agreed with.
I keep thinking like intergalactic.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you're like an intergalactic independent contractor. You aren't with the rebellion, and you're okay with making this giant weapon. You have to be either blatantly lied to or
being paid like $1 billion or something.
Very well compensated.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is getting us to the crux of like whether we would work on the Death Star, like to be employed to build it, to help research for it, any of this. Like, what would it take if we didn't know?
Right. Well, and I mean, also keep in mind that in this world of Star Wars, now, I mean, obviously I'm basing my knowledge off of the EU, which I read a lot of, and now most of the EU is like retconned. But in the EU, for, you know, what we see in the movies with the rebellion is actually a minority. And, you know, there are worlds obviously that suffer under the Empire's rule, but the Empire as a whole in most of the galaxy is not seen as this negative entity. It's seen as this, you know, just elite government. And to work for the Empire is actually, you know, like a positive thing. Like it's something you can put on your resume with pride and say, yes, I worked on this contract with the Empire, you know. And that, you know, I think a lot of contractors especially would kind of jump at that chance just to be able to put that on their, you know, resume and say, hey, yeah, like I did this, and, you know, kind of differentiate themselves from their peers.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Oh, sure. Just when you're writing something, like, of course I wrote this article, but it's just something to put on your resume.
Yeah.
So basically, it wasn't just the rebel or working for the Empire. There were neutral people as well. Definitely. That didn't necessarily.
I could totally see that. Yeah, definitely.
Attribute to either political party.
And I think that's why ultimately, like looking back on the destruction of the Death Star, like it kind of makes me cringe because, I mean, yeah, it's a super weapon. It needs to go. But how many people were actually on that Death Star, and how many people were actually directly employed by the Empire, were actually a part of it, who believed in what the Empire was doing, or were just contractors who were just trying to hold a job and support a family?
Right. And didn't care about, you know, they didn't ask questions. They just got the job done, you know?
Yeah. There's this wonderful, wonderful line in Lord of the Rings that Faramir says in the movies. I think Sam says it in the books. It's been a minute, so I'd have to double check. But they come across, you know, these Harad men, and one of them is killed relatively near to where they are, and they comment, you know, I wonder if he was really evil at heart, or if he was led on, you know, what lies led him on this long march from home. You know, what motivated him, you know, just kind of makes you think, you know, maybe people were on there who were just trying to feed their family, you know, and they didn't really know everything that was going on. They were offered a job with some decent pay, maybe some benefits. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to jump at that, you know?
Yeah. And then there's people like, what was it? Her name from Rogue One. Her parents, her dad.
Jyn Erso?
Yeah, like Jyn's dad, who was like a high-level science guy, was actually like working on it, and that's how he was like a double agent, and that's how the plans got leaked to the rebellion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure there were, you know, a few like that, but with his level of knowledge, I'm sure that was not very common with.
Oh, no. No, not at all. I'm sure that was right. But I wonder how he got to be that way. Like, if he was part of the rebellion to begin with, and it was just really low key that he was in the rebellion and he made his way up through the ranks, or if he turned as soon as he found out what they were really building, and he played the part long enough to keep himself alive and get the word out to the rebellion.
That would be.
I never even thought of that yet.
Yeah. Well, Lindsay, have you seen Rogue One? Did you see it?
I have seen,
Yes.
I've seen it once.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it a couple times, I think, and we own it, so I should probably just watch it again. But like, that's the idea, is that like Jin is trying to get in touch with her dad and didn't know that her dad was actually still alive, I think, because she was raised by this other guy. And,
right, but he was captured,
Yeah.
right? He's being forced to work against
I guess,
his will.
yeah, I guess you're right about that. But like, he's the loose, yeah. I don't know what metaphor I'm going for.
Yeah.
But anyways, he's the one that's leaking it out. And,
Right.
so, and I don't know if it would take like that for me to work on the Death Star. Like, maybe I would initially take the job because of the opportunity that's there. And then if I like found out what it was about, I would keep working it, but still, because I'm very family centered, you know, like if I found out that it was for a terrible purpose, I don't know if I would just quit or if I would keep the job and try to do something good with it.
Right. That's the only way I would be able to keep the job, is if I
Right.
was able to leak the information in hopes of dismantling it, or helping the rebellion, or helping the.
Yeah. This actually somewhat happened on the Star Wars Rebels cartoons. There was I'm not going to say too much, but there is an officer in the Empire who, you know, was well, maybe not well known, but like he was well respected, and he encountered a situation that kind of changed his mind on the Empire, and he started like slowly like leaking information to the rebels and working with them, like under a code name and everything.
I see.
So yeah, like, so that, I won't say that is definitely, you know, uncommon. You know, I mean, I'm sure, you know, if you're kind of working in that mindset, you know, you might just keep working, you know, with that mindset. But if you come to some sort of realization,
Right.
then I think, you know, that's kind of the crux of it, is, do you keep working, trying to supply information? Do you just keep working and keep your head down, or do you quit outright?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, for me, like, if I didn't know what it was for, or if I thought that it was for like a good purpose, like if I thought I was doing research or something to help better the Empire, and I didn't know like the motives of the Empire in the long run or whatever, I'd probably be fine with doing it. You know, like I would just do whatever I needed to do. If for whatever reason it was like a military thing, I probably wouldn't be allowed to, because I have epilepsy, and so as by medical reasons, I don't think they would let me, because they wouldn't want to have to pay for the liability of like something happening. But if it's not military, or if I didn't have epilepsy, then I might just be forced to do it. And maybe that would be the only way I would stay on, is if I were forced to do it anyways and I found out about something happening, you know?
Yeah.
And then if I found out about it, but I was still forced to do it because of my military service, I don't know if I would leave like Finn did in The Force Awakens, or if I would just like keep working because I have to. I think I might be more afraid of what's, you know, like being a deserter. I think I might be more afraid of being a deserter if I were like to desert the military. I don't think I would do that.
It's honor.
Yeah.
It would be less honor to just leave, but.
Yeah, of course, there is also the question of, you know, the risks that you'll take by staying and leaking the information, because
point.
that was also one of the plot points in Rebels, was, you know, this officer got very close to being found out, and eventually was found out. And so they had to engineer his escape. It was very, very tense. So,
yeah.
You know, in the world of Star Wars, it seems like, you know, everything is pretty much replaced by technology, and everything is like traceable in some way. At least it seems that way to me. Like, you know, you can trace, you know, where ships are going. You can trace communications. You know, you have to go through a lot of trouble to like encrypt a communication. But even then, like somehow, like sometimes they can even sense, oh, there's an encrypted message going there. Like, you know,
right, like something secret's going down. Right.
Like, so it would be a risk because, if you are found out, then, you're a traitor.
Yeah.
So then, you'd be imprisoned and taken away and executed at some point in time.
Well, I also wonder, what would the employment contract have in the terms? Like if you refuse to do certain parts of the job, what happens to you?
Yeah.
Would it say that, or would they just be like, I don't care about the contract you signed?
Yeah. Yeah,
right. There's got to be like a disclosure agreement or something that says that you would be punished if you let information leak and they find out. But also, what would the benefits be? Like
what immunity for your family?
What happens to your family? Is there a life insurance policy? Or
I mean, if there were a really good life insurance policy, I mean, there better be.
I think there would have to be for me to work on it, though, too. Like, I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about wages or what compensation really consisted of, but I do feel like there's got to be a life insurance policy for my family, and
like whatever
a
planet
good health insurance policy for me.
Yeah,
if something goes wrong and I have an accident and my finger is blown off, then I'm going to need emergency care.
Right, exactly. Like depending on what work you're doing too, like you'd have to know that you're well taken care of, in addition to if something happened to you, your family.
I'm sure they probably had a really nice package for quite a few contractors, just because, again, it's the empire and it's this elite.
True.
It's seen as this elite thing. So, I mean, obviously they have to, keep that up.
Right.
Because, I'm sure word would get out fairly quickly that, I only got paid really low wages. I didn't get any benefits at all. So,
So don't work for the empire anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't last very long.
I was wondering if, you get hired on for like your 30-day or your 90-day contract, and then you end up being hired on full time or hired on as a real worker. Like how jobs where you're a temporary worker to begin with.
Yeah.
But then the empire hires you on full time.
I don't know. I mean, that could be a benefit or that could be a drawback, depending on how much you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, the empire was the aspired for what you wanted to work for. So you technically wanted to work on the Death Star if you were someone who had the skill set to work there.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously it wasn't known as the Death Star, and like the majority of people probably had no idea what it was. It was probably like this is a need to know basis and you don't need to know kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess what's also interesting too is like the droid dynamic too, because there were lots of droids working on the Death Star too. I wonder like what roles those filled, and if we needed like droid mechanics, like they probably had no idea they were making, fixing droids that worked on the Death Star and that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's so many components because, I mean, obviously, there's the manpower that was actually working on the Death Star once it was completed. But I mean, with everything that was, the Death Star had to be made and assembled. So all of the materials that, came about because of that, whatever metals that they used to construct it, whatever materials that they used, it was all coming from different places.
Yep.
And then obviously the droids and, any equipment and, like computer banks and things like that, like, it's coming from everywhere. So, I mean, probably there was a lot of people actually working on the Death Star that probably had no idea where all these materials were going to. It was just,
that's a really good point.
Job. You're just you're making this computer bank, and this might go to an office on Coruscant. This might go to Mandalore, or it might go somewhere else. I don't know where it's going.
Well, and even the research that went into building something like the Death Star, like a space station of that size that did all those things that it did. And, whatever scientists were researching the actual like laser technology and everything, they could have been researching it for a completely different purpose to begin with. And they were probably researching it for decades before they actually got any physical thing built.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, how science can just be, turned around and used so maliciously, even with, no intention of the original scientist for it to be used in a way like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, I bet you there was a bunch of people that built things for the Death Star or did research that ended up impacting something about the Death Star, and they had no idea. And maybe they were paid really well anyways because the Empire bought their information from them or bought their computers or whatever. But they probably had no idea where it was going unless they actually asked.
I mean, that's what a lot of manufacturing jobs are. You work in a factory, you're assembling things, you have no idea where it's going or how it's being used.
No, exactly.
I will admit, though, that working in any job, I do think it's really important to have like a purpose, like a driving moral background to what I'm doing.
Yeah,
so
same for me.
I would really, I would need that. Like, I would need to know that I was doing something good or something purposeful. And I feel like that's kind of lacking in this. Like, if I just making computers or just building metal structures would be hard for me to really do.
Yeah, that's not the type of job I would want to do either. Like, for me, since I do have a science background, I would, if I were doing anything, I would probably be like researching some type of technology and testing stuff. And it would probably be initially for some completely other purpose, like using, or trying to figure out how big of a space station we can make and what ideal shapes are and what ideal materials would be used for it, that sort of thing. Like, because building a space station in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's actually like, advancing society a little bit to build a space station that's essentially the size of a moon that can house people sufficiently with, having the atmosphere in there and, food stations and recreation facilities, I'm sure, and all of that. And so I could see myself doing something like that where I would be like investigating what types of technologies are necessary to build something like that. But like you said, I don't think I would be like the person to be the builder of those things. That's not my type of job.
Even though there's a whole bunch of people that are working on there that are, lemmings that are doing the work and doing it well. Yeah. I still feel like there's got to be a master architect who knew exactly what was being designed, exactly what was being built, and knew exactly what was being done with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that person.
Oh yeah. It was probably some very high level person in the Empire.
Yeah.
Sith Lord.
Who kept all that under wraps.
Yeah, one of the, because there was the Emperor, and maybe one of the Emperor's, BFFs or something was heading up the Death Star project.
And I mean, there are all kinds of different jobs that were probably on the Death Star, not just science and labor related. I mean, if you think of, a facility of that size, it had to have at least one central medical facility, probably multiple scattered throughout it that you could access easily.
Right.
And I mean, with my background in medical records, that would more than likely be where I ended up working, working with, the medical records and keeping them, straight and organized and everything and, helping out, anybody who came in with that.
You'd have to have that.
There's, doctors and nurses probably and other, people supporting them working on there, that were simply just, taking care of, the people there, whether they got injured or maybe they got sick.
Yeah.
They made sure that, they were healthy.
I could only imagine some of the mishaps on the Death Star, and you'd have to have a certain level of security and to be a medical professional on that. You'd have to have your security levels pretty high up there, and there's the patient provider, what is that called?
Oh, yeah.
Privacy, that thing. Mm-hmm. That would definitely be important too.
I wonder if Star Wars has HIPAA.
I don't know. Yeah, what would Star Wars version of HIPAA be? Yeah. Well, and also like they have to eat. There's got to be some way that, some like, kitchens and either cafeterias or restaurants or something, personal chef for the Emperor or Darth Vader. I don't know. What did Darth Vader eat?
I mean, as far as I know, I don't think Star Wars had food replicators like they did on Star Trek.
I don't think so.
Food had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And even in Star Trek, they still made actual food.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was more for just like the ships that were going on, long journeys.
No, exactly.
And weren't going to.
So like, yeah, they would have had those type of things. They would have had to have like janitorial staff on the Death Star and all kinds of stuff that, behind the scenes workers. I think even Finn said that he was, what was he on the Death Star 2 in The Force Awakens? He was waste management or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so he like knows about it, but he wasn't actually like up close, like in the room with all the plans. He was like the guy that knew all those passageways where the garbage went, which is good information, but
Yeah.
yeah. So like, I guess if I were either blatantly lied to or if I, just, didn't know what the end goal was, and I assumed that it was for some other purpose, I'd probably do the work because I need to make an income, and I could probably make up a greater purpose for myself to keep me going, maybe. But if
I've
I knew
been able to make up a greater purpose every job I've ever had, so there
you go. There you go. Exactly.
Exactly. When you need the money, it's like, well, I'm going to find something.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like without hindsight, I probably would do it. And it probably wouldn't really matter what I was making as long as it was enough to take care of my family.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
But then if I did find out, like I have options, like I wouldn't want to put my life in danger. So I could just play the part and keep going. Or I could just say, hey, I'm done working for you. I found a different job.
And then hitch a ship to some other planet.
Yeah. Just go to Jakku, where everybody wants to go back to Jakku.
Exactly.
Right.
All right. Well, why don't you talk nerdy to us? What would it take for you to work on the Death Star? Would you even accept a job there to begin with? And if you did, where would you be working? You can find Beauties and Headcanons on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr to share your nerdy topic suggestions like this one. Subscribe to this podcast and others from Public House Media on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, and wherever good podcasts are found. We also love feedback, so if you like this episode, or even if you didn't, just give us a rating and a review so we can keep making great episodes for you. I'm Elisabeth.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Lindsay. And thanks for getting nerdy with us today on Beauties and Headcanons.